everybody, welcome to Sounds and Grounds. This is Zeus here, your commander in sneeze, as we're trying to avoid getting the fall colds here. We are on our 10th session today. Amazingly, it's going, hopefully not gone too soon. But again, we seem to one up each episode every time we do things. And today, my co-host Jack Kosto, who everyone follows us and watches in the band Seven Spires, he's currently up in super secret hideaway Fortress of Sounditude tracking Spires 4, which is going to be hopefully out next year. And since we've had a Kosto in-house every episode, our friend and mom of shred and rum, as I've decided to name her, Dianne Kosto, has decided to join as a co-host. And our guest today is Fabian Rush, who is an author, musician, artist, filmmaker, among other things. Dianne, hello, welcome. I'll let you introduce yourself, and then Fabian, you can roll with the punches and take your cues off of her. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going well. I'm happy to be here. Can't replace Jack, that's for sure, but
you could make another one maybe, but replacing
I know I had a big part in him existing, right? So
right,
I do feel honored in that role. So but he's irreplaceable.
Of course he is. Agreed. And Fabian, how are you, man? What's happening in your neck of the woods?
I'm great. Always staying busy, trying to stay motivated. So I can't complain. I'm a happy guy.
Awesome. You can't complain because no one listens anyway, as the old timers say.
Well, and I'm also happier. You know, I'm a happy guy, and that has had an effect on my lyrics for my band. So
cool.
You know, the happier I am, the less doomy my lyrics tend to become. So
that's always the case. Very true. So,
yeah.
Among other things, you are in a band. Synthetic Nightmare is the band that I'm most familiar with, based in Richmond, Virginia.
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that? That's a good intro, so people can kind of get a feel for one of many things that you're into these days.
Yeah. Gosh, Synthetic Nightmare is a wild ride. The Synthetic Nightmare, the band formed in 2004. I joined in 2000, toward the end of 2006, early 2007. And it has been an immature, drunken, stupid party ever since. And of course, we're getting older now, and we almost half the band has kids. And so we're all having to be a bit more immature. I mean, more mature.
Oh, but, no, both.
Both, a little bit of both. The lyrics have gotten sillier, but yeah, it's been a great time musically. I'm a big metal fan, so it's got its hard end, but it also has a techno-y. I would describe it as video game metal.
Awesome.
It has a kind of an electronic sound to it also. So we mix things up a bit.
Right. Yeah, it's really cool. I know, as well as with the band, we'll get into your movie making, writing, and directing hats that you wear. You use your band's music for your movies as well, right?
Yes, sometimes. And sometimes when the sound I'm looking for with the movie isn't right for that film, that's in the case of say Forsaken or Rock Opera of Chaos and Fatagan Rock Opera of Doom. I needed to create a different sound, and so I got to do a musical project with you and Simon. So
yeah.
Sometimes you just got to go where it needs to go.
It was really cool. So you basically were like, hey, we're working on these songs. My band's doing some songs, but I need more.
Yeah.
Here's some ideas, and send it. And we got them like on a Friday or Saturday. And I think the whole weekend was like an inspiration fest. We put them in the Pro Tools rig and just started playing and writing. And we wrote, I think we did 4 or 5 songs for your movie. And they just wrote themselves. You know, it was so fun to do. And the topic of the film that you did was so cool and sort of out of our wheelhouse for what we traditionally had been into. I mean, everyone that's a metalhead knows about Cthulhu from, you know, Ride to Lightning from Metallica and
Oh
stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah, at
But
least.
to see your take as a friend of ours that has done videos for our bands for at least 20 years ago, I think the video you had done for us,
Wow.
maybe close to that. Can you talk about your influence on your movies and how that might tie in to music?
Oh,
Did they affect each
every
other or
yes,
enhance each
every
other a
movie
lot?
I do, all the ideas generally come to me while I'm driving in my car to some place and I'm listening to music, and then a song hits and if it's in any way atmospheric, it gets in there and suddenly ideas start going. All music paints pictures in my mind. I loved doing music videos in my early filmmaker days when I was learning, but now uh, I just I can put on any song and then the visuals just start pouring in, and so a lot of movies come originally from a song.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And of course, you talk about inspirations. Each of my movies has a completely different inspiration, so you'd almost have to break it down by movie that way.
Right.
But yeah, I'm because I'm a metalhead, that goes very nicely hand in hand with my love for horror films and dark science fiction. So
Right.
I was
So
gonna ask you how you picked that genre in the movie realm was the horror films, but I think you just kind of answered that.
I jumped on that one before it was too late. I went into your mind psychically and
Yeah,
remote viewed your next question.
must have.
he did. I tried to remote view this whole session, but I was too tired because I've been up since 4. So I was like,
Oh darn.
we'll just figure it out. Um,
Oh,
I'm like holding off the remote viewing and the psychic talk we're gonna have till we sort of get all this stuff out of the way. It's like, yeah, video games, music, books, blah blah blah.
yes.
Now
Yes.
let's talk about fun stuff.
Okay, yes, that that makes perfect sense. We'll go through the one word answer stuff,
Right.
the click them right off.
Right. So I'll hit. You do have some questions from your introduction video that you posted. Thank you, by the way, for doing that. We are
Sure.
driven primarily by friends and followers and fans of the special guests we have to sort of
Yeah.
steer the ship, as I say. So some of you may know Bailey Catherine Rush. She would like to know, who is your favorite Final Fantasy VII character and why?
The first thing that pops into my head is that I gotta say Sephiroth, because he's awesome. He's got that massive sword, that long flowing, uh, uh, almost Greco, godly hair.
Right on.
But I don't think that's my true answer. Now, as a more mature man, I'm gonna say my favorite character is probably Aerith, because she can
Right.
talk to the freaking planet.
Wow.
Like she can communicate with the earth, and that's next level.
Right. That
Yeah.
seems attainable. Like people should be able to do that, not just
It'd be nice.
characters in video games.
Yeah, we obviously do not talk to the planet.
Right. I mean, it screams at us, and we
Yes.
can barely listen, but maybe
Nope.
talking back.
We don't listen to each other.
What? What
We
did
don't
you say?
listen to each
Sorry.
other. We don't listen to the planet. We don't listen to anything.
We listen to ourselves most of the time, unfortunately, and we're like dyslexic and paranoid and multi-personality 9 times out of 10.
So many disorders.
But so I see a lot about Final Fantasy VII. I personally, I'm not into video games. I love people's passion and can listen to people talk. And, you know, like I know Jack and Adrian from Spires, they kind of tag team and play. And one does like the legwork and research while the other one's like playing the character. But it seems Final Fantasy VII is a big deal. What's so special about 7? Because aren't there like 15 Final Fantasies, like some
Yes.
crazy number?
There are a ton of Final Fantasy games, but 7 is one of those games that, now I'm not a big gamer. Bailey's a big gamer. When I was in high school, I was a big gamer. I loved things like Mortal Kombat, and I loved racing games and Doom.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But
Wolfenstein. I remember that was
oh
the
yeah,
first game I
all
ever
that stuff.
played all the way through on the computer.
Yes. So I'm more of a retro gamer, but Final Fantasy VII is a game that seems to be a it is the one game that almost has to step out away from other video games. You know how every now and then you get a game that is worth making into a movie, like your Resident Evil, your Silent Hill, and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Final Fantasy VII, that's a game that had such an elaborate story and such amazing characters that you had to take notice. And you can, the concepts in that game are the amount of research and passion that went into it. I would quicker sit down to watch the cutscenes from Final Fantasy on YouTube than watch most modern movies.
Wow.
Yeah, that is the level of storytelling behind Final Fantasy VII.
It's kind of like, well, that's really the Final Fantasy. After that, it's like the post-final. It's not really
Yes.
final. It's like a new fantasy.
They
It's
keep
all
making new
final.
ones, but for me and many people I know, none of those new ones live up to number 7.
Right. How can you top something that's that epic? You really can't, even as
Pretty
a
incredible.
game player. Yeah. And it's like we talked about with bands doing their final tour. It's like they do a final tour and then there's another final tour. And then there's another final tour. Right.
And then things start to get a little older sounding, and then we start to lose interest, and we kind of wish they did stop when they promised they would. That happens
Right.
sometimes.
And then the music's playing and the guy's not playing his instrument and he's not
Yeah.
synced up together, which is a big
Whoops.
thing now. Uh-oh.
Oh yeah.
But
But the fans still show up. The real
Yeah.
fans still show up. to
yeah,
support
and,
them, you
and
know?
the critics are always going to be there, so you can't worry about them. But you know,
Exactly.
they're always going to jump on one specific thing to nitpick and say, "Oh, yeah, it sounded good. These guys are pushing 80, but the bass guitar wasn't the same song that he played for 2 seconds." Like, I don't know.
All these little
Musicians,
differences.
right?
We
right.
are all human, aren't we?
Yeah. As far as
Little
I
bit.
can tell, I don't know, with AI in the mix here shortly, maybe not, but where are you gonna go? What are you gonna do?
Exactly.
But
Where do you go from here?
you have AI creating its own AI, so it's leveling up. Once that happens, I think we're pretty much done. I love movies like 13th Floor and things where it's like people created a game and people in the game created a game, and the people in the game level 1 didn't realize they were in a game, of course, and then level 1 finds out about level 2 and they mix and match. Like, I love those kind of concepts. Like, that's
I was working on a
super
script about something very similar
wow, really.
for a project,
Um
and I put it on hold because it was
I'm gonna light a fire under you.
I put that one
Sounds
on hold.
interesting to me.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I mean, you thinking, so you're also an author as well as a filmmaker. What's some of the differences? Like, what made you write your book, Remembering Owls, which primarily is about alien, of course, cool stuff, and abduction, right? Why would you say write a book versus make a movie? Because the 2 films you've made that I'm familiar with, and of course, someone could go IMDb. I'll put your link in the bottom here. You wrote those specifically to be film, not a novel or a book.
Right.
Like, how do you decide, well, I want to make this into a movie, or I would rather write a book about this topic?
That's an excellent question. The deciding factor for me is how visual the story is. It's a film is all about visual storytelling. And it's actually a combination of different styles where, of course, films are written first. But yes, they do have a massive visual element, but also an audio element. So for film, you have to have a lot of different artistic elements come together to tell a great story. Whereas a book, you if there's not a whole lot visually going on and a lot of it is conceptual and things for you to really just think about, then that's a time when you really ought to keep it in the appropriate realm for that. So in the case of Remembering Owls, the book is about a man having conversations with extraterrestrials and higher beings. So throughout the whole book, he's really just having conversations. So to have a film where a man and an alien are sitting at a coffee table discussing, it's going to have a different impact on an audience where people will be like, oh, how long is this? Whereas if they're listening to this in their car, it's available on Audible and a few other of these audio streaming sites. If you're listening to this while you're driving, then there cannot be a visual element. So it's all about just listening to what's being said, so you can take in the story better that way.
Right.
So I decide, if it's not a powerful visual story, then make it a powerful audio story or a written story.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Dianne, you're also an author and have just released a book, which I'm proud to say I've read, and it's very cool. What are some of your thoughts? The story you have is more of a, what'd you call it, a autobiography about your family and how you came to know about biofeedback and that awesome realm of science, I would call it, that exists to help people. What was your process, writing a book, and do you think your story could be something that would be film worthy? I mean, I do, but I'm biased.
Yeah, so I've been told that by some others, so I appreciate that. Yeah, we went through a lot, and my book and the concept of it really came out specifically to be a resource for families, to help them avoid going through the trauma and the years of searching for solutions. So when I created it, it wasn't really to regurgitate my past, it was to create a resource that's an easy read that gets that information out there, because neurofeedback should be mainstream. So that's kind of how I approached that part of it. It wasn't easy to go through that personal experience part of it, but that is what I've been told we should do, of more of a documentary on, and go deeper dive into it. I just get myself prepared emotionally for something like that, because that was
right.
not easy.
Yeah, I'd imagine you relive that moment that was traumatizing, obviously writing it, and then I understand you've also done an audio book version that was recorded and engineered by someone we know pretty well.
Yeah, Jack did it. So I was even nervous opening up my book and actually reading it in front of my son, who was part of the whole trauma triangle, that we had. So yeah, and I'm grateful that he did it. But
yeah, well, how was his reaction to this? Because I'm curious also, Fabian, you can touch on this too. Including your family members in a story or a book, how receptive are they to it? Obviously they may have some issues if they're going to relive what's there. Fabian, this is more of if you have if you've created a fictional character based on a family member as well, but still, both authors, how does your family kind of cope with all of a sudden, here's a part of my life out there, here's something I've influenced, going to be here forever, it's written. What's their take on that that happening, that action?
You want to go first, Fabian, or me?
Either one. Whoever.
I'll touch quickly, since we were just talking about Jack. And so my youngest son has been the poster child for 13 years since I've been talking about neurofeedback. So I've shared my story with people, which is part of why the book needed to be done anyways. Everybody would ask, when's the book coming out? So I've always been talking about my experience with them, and Nellie didn't like it. He was not happy about it for many years, and it's taken into his adulthood for him to realize. And I asked them permission, because I didn't want to put anything out there that they absolutely were going to hate me for, right?
Yeah, one more thing.
I don't need additional things to add to that.
Like, I thought we were good, but no, you're doing this again.
Right. So I had them read the drafts as they were evolving, and I didn't expect to even be using their names in it, but they were like, that's fine. It's my perspective on it. They have their own opinions. Maybe one day they'll write their version of it, because, they don't agree with all of the decisions I made, I'm sure. And But I made sure that we were all on the same page before it was published, at least.
Cool.
I have the same take there. I would say two things. One, because I'm also a documentary filmmaker, we can stay in touch if you do get to that point where you want to take this into a video direction. But also, I think regarding the actual situation, sharing this kind of information that can be private, I think communication is everything. It all starts with communication, understanding within the family first. If something has happened that has caused a lot of trauma and the communication is happening, the communication is probably the first step to healing anything. And once wounds are a little less open and the healing has begun, sharing, when everybody's in agreement, sharing can be very good. And sometimes, more often, the sharing can be very important for people who have gone through trauma that you don't know. Somebody who might read the book later and you had no idea you would ever have this impact on a person, but they may read your book and say, wow, I thought I was the only one who went through this situation. Of course, I'm saying this not knowing. I haven't read the book, so I don't know what trauma you're talking about, but there are many traumas that people experience. I've experienced several, and I know tons of people who have experienced life-changing trauma. And so this can go for any situation I think they all kind of follow the same thing, where trauma is something that needs to be dealt with one way or the other, and you're never actually alone when it comes to certain types of trauma. There are many traumas that are shared with millions of people, and even though you might think you're alone on this. So sometimes just another voice helps.
I think we all have something that is our trauma, and it's different for all of us. But as I have shared ours, I know that everybody's trauma is theirs, and we all experience something. It's just like I talk about, I never see a perfect QEEG brain mapping. We all have some type of dysregulation in our brains. We all have some type of experience that was hard for us, right? That's what makes us human. So
yeah. It's a lot of it is in how we react to these traumas. Does it now? I'm going Marvel with this for a moment, where if the difference I've heard, I don't remember where I heard this recently. The difference between a superhero and a supervillain is how they deal with their trauma. Done. I'm done.
Right. So basically what Dianne is into with symmetry, as you can see, and neurofeedback is a perfect destination for this conversation, where you have two people with trauma. One becomes a superhero because they were able to get biofeedback treatment via symmetry in Dianne Kosto's company, and the other didn't and becomes a villain and their dysregulation feeds itself and they go farther and farther down the rabbit hole. Dianne, can you talk a little bit about what you do and kind of the bullet points? Because I really think the people that watch our sessions and know us and are all geeky, nerdy metalheads, I think they all would benefit from knowing what you can do and the proof and the examples that have been done to so many people where changes have actually occurred in real life. It's not like a pseudoscience or something where there's a 1,000 different the fine print is like one little paragraph. There's not like 10,000 things. It's like, well, this isn't really what this is, like an infomercial. But what you do is actually proven and has a track record of success. Can you talk just a little bit, a little or a lot, as much as you want, about symmetry and the biofeedback work that you do?
I'll try to keep it brief because that could be a whole couple hours of conversation, and Fabian's the star here. But
we're all stars.
Yeah. Neurofeedback is using technology to help the brain better regulate. The whole goal is to help the communication in our brain function better at a more normalized, easy level where we're adapting into each situation that we're in an easy way, and we're not stuck in a certain pattern. So I like to think of it as technology-driven learning, because we're able to measure the brainwave activity and then amplify that, analyze it, and give somebody feedback on what their brain's doing. And by doing that, they can learn new, healthier patterns. So it's just simple. Some people have heard of biofeedback more often than they hear neurofeedback. So neurofeedback is biofeedback specific to the brain.
Right. So some of the things that you offer and can do with your treatment, of course, trigger things to me like, oh, well, what about this? What about this? Now, I'll try to keep it kind of linear here because I can wander and be like way over here somewhere. But what do you consider like a normal map when you take a reading of someone's neurology, right? I suppose you would call it, or what's your baseline? Like, how do you determine, well, this is normal and how is this not normal? Because I always go to the side of the coin where it's like, well, what if somebody starts using this negatively? Because everything could be used for a positive to fix things, just like everything could be used on the other end that normal people wouldn't want to do. But how are there safeties involved, and how extensive? Like, for example, and I think this will sum it up. Like if somebody wanted to enhance a certain ability or skill they have, is it that specific where you could say, well, this person wants awesome memory, like they want to have a photographic memory? Is that something you could pinpoint and say, well, let's work on that? Or is it sort of like just normalizing your brain so it doesn't have all this crazy spikes and peaks going on?
So there's a couple aspects of that, but
Sorry.
what do we use as the norm? Because normal isn't really a politically correct term anymore. Anyways, is our software, and what I've used for the last, I guess, 12, 13 years, is we measure the QEEG brainwave activity, and it's just brainwaves, alpha, theta, delta, of the different frequencies that you've heard in brainwave activity. And that gets compared to what they call a normative database from when they've studied brain maps. And it doesn't mean that normal is perfect. It means that there's certain patterns in different networks of your brain. Let's say your attentional network. If you have dysregulation and it's not functioning the way it should, you're likely to struggle with attention issues. So we know the certain patterns in the brain that are asymptomatic, that, you know, are healthy, that people do not have symptoms with. And we know when they're disrupted, people might have that symptom. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a normative database on the general patterns of what a healthy brain should be doing. Not that we ever have a perfect brain in that normative database, because no one has a perfect brain, but we know what the brain should be doing. So our data gets compared to that, and it kicks out a report and gives us, it'll show us, well, that impulsivity network is dysregulated, or that memory network or that processing network is dysregulated. And the goal is to help the brain learn patterns closer to the normal healthy patterns that it should be producing. Is not to go in and create a superpower, or to go in and fix a diagnosis, or to go in and, unfortunately.
Darn. Well, let me mark these off my list.
Just cross it off, throw that book away. So the whole goal is to help people better regulate their brains, and they function better. They might sleep better, they might focus better, but you can't really predict exactly what's gonna fall into place first all the time. You can target certain areas that are primarily responsible for those things, but the brain is so complicated, it's kind of like a Rubik's Cube. As it's starting to heal and better regulate, it might have to mix up some colors on one side to get them straightened out on the other side. So it's definitely not a linear process of healing at all.
Right. Wow, that's cool. It's not, it is in depth, but you explain it very like basically, so like even I can understand what you're saying.
I'm trying to, but thank you. It's hard to simplify it. But
right. But I mean, ultimately, that's what they say. That's how you know someone's able to teach and knows what they're teaching you, is they can explain it to someone that doesn't have any experience in the field. Which, just even reading your book, there's terms and things in there. I'm like, I need to Google this. Like, what's this? What's that? You know, and there's only so many ways to say something in a simple format that has to do with brain and brainwave activity and frequencies of like thought patterns and processes. It's all an amazing field. And my whole thought with today's session was tying that into a lot of what Fabian does, which has to do with ESP and remote viewing. If you all want to jump into that canoe,
Well,
it's
one
a good
thing I'll say,
segue to it.
one thing I'll say that based on what you've just said about the great explanation from teachers, so many concepts are actually quite simple. I've discovered this in my studies of my limited studies of how the human mind works. My background is more in physics, and I found I'm actually writing a theoretical physics book for children as
What?
right now.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I've been working on that. I was an elementary school teacher, and
Really?
this was a long time ago when I first graduated from college.
Wow.
And I found,
I had no idea.
oh yeah, if you just talk to children the way you would talk to adults, with the same respect and with the same goals, children will ask you questions on where they're falling short. And so everything can be made simple. I find physics is remarkably simple and demonstratable. When things get out really complicated, is I found oftentimes when a theory is a little bit too far out there. If it's something that you cannot demonstrate, repeat, have scientific testing for, you need to come up with better scientific tests. So the theoretical physics book I'm working on right now is intended for very young minds to understand, because I want to take away the mystery and where people say, oh, it's not rocket science. Well, rocket science actually isn't anywhere near as complicated as neuroscience, for example.
Right.
A rocket, you attach a bomb to the thing you're sitting on
With a smaller bomb on it.
with a smaller bomb on it, and then it shoots you up. All you have to do is come up with the correct mathematical equations to not blow yourself up with the bomb, but be propelled by it. That is rocket science, and the math behind it. That's what scares people, and so many sciences can be broken down. And if you want to get more in depth with things, that's where it can get more complicated. And I have a great deal of respect for what you were saying, Dianne, about the neuroscience and how you can look at the brain waves, because I've done the same thing, but with a different goal in mind, where you were asked about, can you find a normal brainwave pattern, which, everybody's minds are in so many different places. And I have not done these experiments myself, but I've been at the seminars where they were demonstrated to me on people who had electrodes on their head being measured while they're doing meditation. And you'll see in these situations where the electrodes are measuring both the right and left hemisphere of the brain. They'll show you the different alpha, delta, all the different brainwave frequencies. And one of the things we see in the meditating, calm, and focused mind, which sometimes are different things. The calm mind is different from the focused mind, is different from the sleeping mind, all these things. These are all big differences. And what was interesting to see, they had it during the seminar, they had it up on a really big screen TV. They were outputting it from the machine and their computer. And it was a visual representation of these wave patterns. The right side of the screen was the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And they're always going back and forth all over the place. It looks like chaos. But in meditation, you'll see that the hemispheres start to balance out. And you'll see a mirror image of the right hemisphere on the left hemisphere. And so those are some of the things that you might be talking some more about, Dave, where you're wanting to ask, well, how do I get the superpowers? How do I learn about the focus? Well, once you've had your healing, once you have, like, if you're dealing with anxiety or you're dealing with any number of mental hurdles. Once you have healed from some of those things and you want to move on and learn, well, actually, I would recommend using meditation itself to help you with things like anxiety and depression, in addition to various other practices. But once you have taken care of the places where you need to heal, then you can start focusing on, well, in meditation, how do I match my right hemisphere and my left hemisphere? How do I find deeper focus and things like that? So the superpowers are there, but
Yeah.
it's in a
Peak
hierarchy.
performance. That's true.
Exactly.
And you're talking about a whole new field of neuromeditation that's
Yes.
emerging, where you are measuring the brainwave activity while you're doing different styles of meditation. And you hear kind of the general people speaking that you should just have more alpha. Meditation is associated with alpha brainwaves, and it's better, more alpha, the better. That's not always the case. Some people have too much alpha in the wrong side of their brain, and that's why they struggle with depression and mood regulation issues. So you don't want them doing certain styles of meditation, and it's not going to help them.
Exactly.
So when you learn that, and you can use those readings to master the type of meditation that's best for your brain, that is superpower. Yeah, that could be superpower.
Yes.
In a
And
way.
sometimes the meditation is not even a meditation. It's not the
Yeah, right.
that it's not that stuff.
Different.
It could be playing your guitar. It could be gardening. It can be any number of activities that make your brain waves, your mental state of mind become calm, or whatever the desired effect is. I meditate because I can, but there are some people with really busy bodies, and chemically they're not allowed to meditate, so they might gravitate more towards something like Tai Chi or yoga. And then there are people who run and will get the same effect in their brain as meditation. So different things work for different people.
Right. So meditation isn't just, like you said, a typical this thing. It's for everybody what helps them kind of focus and balance and achieves that uniform brainwave pattern. Dianne, is that something, a uniform brainwave pattern that neurofeedback can help with? Is that part of regulation, or what are the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of trying to find that balance. That our left brain should produce more beta waves when we're thinking or focusing on things, and the right brain should have more alpha. When it's reversed, that's when people have trouble, and when they're stuck in that reversed pattern, but our brains are always producing a lot of different frequencies of brain waves, and we should be able to shift back and forth depending on what we're doing. So we just use that measuring and the technology to help them be able to shift better, or to balance those hemispheres out, like Fabian talked about. It depends, I mean, there are the studies where they've done it for peak performance, for musical performance. The Royal College of Music in London did a study, in 40 sessions of neurofeedback, their performance level increased by an entire grade level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important.
And that's because they better regulated their brain and were able to calm themselves down too, right? So it's all kind of tied together.
Yeah, yes. I feel like you sort of read my mind, because my next question literally is, you have two sons, one Jack and your other son that your book's about and your biofeedback experience is focused on. I was going to say, Jack, I call him a prodigy, and he's so chill and like humble that he's like, he kind of smiles and is like, I don't know about that. It's like, yeah, you were at Berkeley when you were 13, 14, 15, thinking about that. Do you think, okay, two-part question, as I always do. Have you done brain mapping on Jack? Can you say yes or no? Is he comfortable with that, not being here? But do you think that because he had music, he found music and found a creative outlet, and it, I think, was his meditation, like we're talking about, he found this thing to help regulate his brain as a creative outlet. And from reading your book, it seems like your younger son didn't ever find that thing on his own. Do you think that made a difference in their brainwave activity and kind of their thought patterns being normalized, not standard or regular, but being more consistent.
Yeah, I think it was key that Jack picked up that guitar and found his musical passion, you know, because he would, yeah. And we have mapped his brain. He's only had a couple neurofeedback sessions. I think he would tell you, you know, we all could benefit from more of that. But that was a really big difference maker in his life to find that passion. And I think it was really important to encourage him in that way. So, and yeah, my youngest didn't. He needed, and it was a whole different thing. They were such different people anyways, you know. The
Right.
youngest, his stuff came out as really 110% boy with a bad attitude, so he got kicked out of everything, where Jack would kind of conform and do his own thing, and you know, had an easier life because of it in a way.
Very much riding the wave, or as Jack used in a analogy, it's like a roller coaster, you know. It seems like he's very focused and calm, and it's like sometimes I just like listen because he doesn't speak until it's something that like needs to be said, and it's like, wow, that's awesome. Someone so young that has like this really deep kind of approach to everything is really cool, and you did a great job raising him. So
well, thank
congratulations.
you. And there's pros and cons, though. Jack took on some of the things I think he's noticing now that I was always, as I was a single mom, and I was trying to make sure they always felt safe and secure, and that they had like this normal, healthy life, even though I went through a divorce and a weird situation, but I was the duck on water kind of person. And I think Jack's taken on some of that. And, you know, where you're just, everything's calm, cool, and collected, but underneath you're like, woo, you know, your little feet are paddling 100 miles an hour. And that's good. That's okay to an extent. You know, I might have been a little shut off some emotions to be able to do that. So there's pros and cons to everything. You know, but.
Sure. Now, Fabian, how about you for a little background history? Like, what are some of your favorite memories of maybe things that inspired you? I know we can't really pigeonhole you because you do so much with movies and everything and entertainment. But as an artist, I would certainly classify you as an artist. Everything you do has this like unique artistic value, in my opinion, you know. Like, what are some of the things that you obviously had something to focus on to regulate yourself growing up? What are some of those things you want to share?
Well, it's interesting. On the same topic, I guess, in terms of things to focus on, as you can tell, my focus changes often as I satisfy a particular artistic endeavor. But I guess one thing that a lot of people don't know about me is that I've dealt with anxiety issues for decades. And meditation for me is one of the things that helped me to channel those anxieties in different places, and a lot of them came out in very artistic ways. So anxiety and the terror you can feel while dealing with it is very handy if you're a horror writer or a musician or you're dealing with anger issues and all kinds of things. So in many ways, I've experienced things in my life where I perhaps had some angst or aggression that needed to come out, and I found a very productive way of dealing with that in a way that won't hurt anyone. As much as I've wanted to hurt somebody in the past, if you have violent feelings, put them into a violent movie. If you want to yell and scream obscenities, make the right kind of music for that.
All right.
And so from a very young age, I have loved hard rock and metal, and I always liked horror movies, though now I'm backing off with the horror movies quite a bit. I have a child.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror. It's overindulging itself, I think, at this point.
Yeah, horror doesn't do as much for me now. And of course now I have a daughter now. And so once she was born, suddenly every time I watch a horror movie that I used to love, I'd be like, well, I would hate for my daughter to be in this situation. I'm turning this off. And so like as a young person, I loved Pet Sematary. Can't watch it anymore.
Right.
Can't watch anything where a child is hurt. I loved Pumpkinhead. Can't watch Pumpkinhead anymore. Like all those old things, they've all got to go away. I just want to watch cartoons with her now.
Yeah.
So
Or Children of the Corn, where the kids are like killing everybody. That's
no,
okay.
That's okay. It's the kids that are, the kids are the aggressors there, but I
Right.
I can't watch anything where children are the
Yeah.
victims. In fact,
Yeah.
I've become completely resensitized to just about anything where people are hurt. I was an angry teenager, for many reasons, but I came to terms with so much of that. And for me, meditation has been one of those things that it has removed me from the negative situation I'd be in, and it forces me out of my own head and into a larger way of thinking, where I look at myself from the perspective of other people or from the rest of the world. I'm not always Fabian, this ego being that identifies as a Black male living in America, in his 40s. Like all that stuff, all that goes away. Suddenly I'm just a being. We're all just beings wrapped in our own egos trying to make it. And I found that when I do my meditations, all that perspective comes back. And I don't have the anger. There's no reason for it. You just deal with the problem.
Right. You do have another outlet or alter ego. I will highly suggest anyone watching go to, well, specifically what I think is the anger ego. Look at Synthetic Night. Look at some of their videos on YouTube. So whenever I want to explain Fabian to someone for whatever reason, filmmaker friend, I have this one friend that's like a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fanatic, and of course your conversation comes up, and we can talk about that here in a second. I'll show them like your videos. So what Fabian does is, I don't know anything about bondage and stuff, but I think you sort of have like everything you wear is like super snug. You have devil horns. So this is his singing. Do you have a singing alter ego? Does this character have a name, your singer, or is it you're just...
No, everything is just Fabian.
Okay,
and
just Fabian
himself is I'm an empty being, so I can take on any character.
Just a vessel.
I'm the vessel. I'm the actor.
Right.
I'm just the universe made conscious of itself. And today the universe is acting in a movie, or today the universe wants to be in a band in front of people wearing devil horns.
Right.
The devil horns came from a Catholic upbringing that I did not agree with.
Right.
I wanted to undo my Catholicism, and now I can proudly say I think I have undone it.
Right.
I think you did.
Yeah.
And it's not just devil horns, because I mean, I could go get devil horns. He does a full-on demonic creature. So the thing beyond devil horns is fully hooven footwear. So they're like heeled boots with like cloven hooves. And
40
you're like,
pounds of oak is what
how much
those
is
are made
that?
out of. They're made, the hooves are made of oak, and it's 40 pounds of oak. Those things hurt like hell to walk around in.
Yeah. But just showing someone, say, this is my friend Fabian, check it out. And it's just like, okay, I'm done talking. I'm done talking to you. I'm moving on, which is a funny thing because I know you through my brother, who's kind of opposite of me. He's very spiritual. He's Christian. He goes and plays in church. Like he's 100% like devout to that thing, and it works for him. It's great. But the fact that he was your friend for so long, even though you're a demon on stage and shooting sparks and grinding stuff and this craziness, it was like, okay, so people aren't always what they portray. Like even when I was young, 20 years ago, we were all much younger, and seeing my brother is friends with everybody, but there's a close circle of people that are like brotherly, like fellowship worthy people. And when someone's in his circle, they kind of get a pass from me because he's a much better judge of character. I just dislike everybody to start and move on from there. where he actually kind of gives people the time of day to talk to them and see what they're about. And they make some mistakes, and maybe everything they're into isn't the greatest or whatever he might not agree with, but he like every person to him is worthy of his time to decide, well, should I be friends with this person? Should I invest relationship emotions with people? And he still is friends with people. I'm like, I can't believe you're friends with that person because they maybe did this, this, or this.
Yeah.
And again, he's the opposite of me. He tends to find these positive things that he can still maintain connections with people. But you fell into that category early on, which you got a free pass. I'm like, well, this dude's worthy of knowing and investing in. So he kind of
my demon persona.
right, the demon persona and the acting persona that's a comedian. Your stuff is so funny, and you're able to say things and get away with things. Because I know you, that people that know you, it may hinder some of your work because they don't know you as a person. It might take something you're saying out of context. Just anyone I recommend, look up Vitagan Rod, the rock opera of doom. And you can listen to it. That should be an audio book version of that, because oftentimes I'll just listen to, the dialogue from your movie. It's so awesome. Your storytelling style and mixing horror, but with the comedy part, that's so much science, horror, and fantasy has this seriousness. Like you don't mix comedy with science and Cthulhuism type of stuff. But you do it, and it's like, it's not ironic. Like, it feels like this is really, he wrote this and came up with these ideas because he's a funny person,
I think it's important. There are certain things that are taken a little too seriously. And there are many directions I can go with what I'm thinking right now in terms of
throw out the seeds.
There's a great deal of sensitivity. The world is becoming socially more aware every day, to the point where I say things that are highly offensive all the time. And it's because I was born in 79, so I was raised in the 80s and 90s, where people said a lot of very offensive things that are no longer okay today. And so I was desensitized to many words that nowadays, if they're thrown out there, somebody is blacklisted. Or right. I don't even know if blacklisted is still okay to say, but yeah, things are
canceled. Yes. The new PC version of blacklisted is.
There are many PC things out there that I'm still learning to adapt to, because it is important. The world is more socially aware, and it has evolved since my childhood, where we do acknowledge other kinds of people that think differently or look differently or believe differently, and that's important. We know that they exist now. They're out there. I grew up thinking there was only Christianity, and I didn't know that there were other ways of thinking until I started to explore these things. And now there's so much more knowledge in the world, so it is worth becoming more aware and not stagnating in the way you think. Of that, I chose to go that direction with what I was going to say. That I went the PC direction first,
right?
Because there is other sensitivity. Many of the film projects I've worked on have been removed from YouTube for being a bit offensive. Yes, yeah. So that's telling me that there are some things I've made that you have not seen, and there were even things I've done with Synthetic Nightmare that would now not be considered PC, and so there is a certain level of sensitivity. Like, I'm trying to think of what's mainstream enough, where Comedy Central, for example, for a long time, they would tell very sexist, chauvinistic jokes, and it was just this accepted thing. And now, like, we're looking at these things and we're like, you know what? I thought this was funny back in the late 90s, and now I'm like, wow, these guys are just pigs a lot of the time. And so now I threw Comedy Central out there because Comedy Central is filled with comedians And comedians are known for having insult jokes or really offensive jokes. And a lot of the time they don't actually, they're not saying these jokes to be actually sexist or racist. They're telling these jokes to kind of put it in people's faces and say, this is how a lot of the world thinks. And it's ridiculous to think this way, to think that somebody of another ethnicity is wrong or psycho because they think this way. So there's a lot of a comedy is one of those things that should be a uniter, and it should be a safe space for people to say things how they see the world. And sometimes that's not always the case. So in the case of my rock opera, Fatagan Rock Opera of Doom, which is about H.P. Lovecraft, my personal favorite author. Anybody who's a big fan of the Cthulhu mythos and the Necronomicon and all these different things that you see all the time in horror films, science fiction films, they all make reference. Well, it's known that H.P. Lovecraft was a bit he was a bit of a racist, and he was quite xenophobic. He's this guy who he eventually passed in the, I believe, the early 1940s. So he lived at a time where these social issues were out there, and he was very out there about how racist he was and what his political views were. But at the same time, he was this brilliant writer. And I think there, every now and then, people seem to get a pass, and they think, oh, I can't listen to what this person said because they were a racist. Well, guess what? A lot of people were racist at that time. It's not an acceptable way to think, but you have to step back from your feelings every now and then. I do this with my meditations. You step outside of yourself for a moment and say, where was this person flawed? What traumas did they face during their lives that made them this way? A lot of the time, in the case of racism, there is a certain growing up where you are growing up in a certain group and you are taught to think a certain way. And a lot of the time, like racism, it doesn't usually come from being attacked by a person, by a particular group. A lot of the time it comes from learning this from the people who are teaching you about the world. And I'm saying this from a perspective of, I have many friends who are former white supremacists. They prefer nationalists, but I've met a lot of people who have come up to me later and said, you know, Fabian, this is weird of me to say, but prior to meeting you, I was a serious racist. My father was in the KKK. I've had people say that to me. And after they are separated from parental figures of a certain type, or they're exposed to different parts of the world, their minds expand and they realize, wow, I need to change the way I've been thinking. So I take this back to somebody like H.P. Lovecraft, who actually did have some interactions. He eventually married a Jewish woman. And toward the end of his life, he was very ashamed of some of his views, which we've learned about from some of his letters. So sometimes it's not that a person is evil, but it's because they are coming from some level of trauma, hurt, and programming that has made them come across in a way that makes us not want to associate with them. And because of my upbringing, I can't help but look at all people as me. We're all one. My true belief is that we're all connected. We're all one being. You are both me, but from your own perspectives. You are raised in different places, but ultimately we're all cut from the same exact cloth, but we have life experience that makes us go in different directions. So that's my approach to all people. So I love your brother. Your brother is amazing. I don't talk to him nearly enough. I haven't spoken with him. It feels like it's been years. Like, he'll wish me happy birthday every now and then and stuff like that. But
yeah,
when you can talk to a person that is other than you, or identifies in some way differently from how you identify, and you can find the value in that person. Those are the people I gravitate to. I talk to a very diverse group of people. A few people that think like me, but I try to surround myself with people that are completely unlike me, so I can learn something more.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna catch my breath for a moment.
Yeah, take a drink. That's awesome. Just again, I have people on here that I want to listen to them talk and learn from them. So that's part of having a circle of people that are diverse.
Yeah.
And just knowing, because we talked about the former nationalist or Proud Boys, you can call them now. There are all kinds of things and categories for different people to present themselves as something that's legitimate that really shouldn't exist. My brother we talked about you yesterday, so he's always thinking about you because I was telling him I'm helping him with his company. He can't find people to work, so I'm like, well, you know what? I'll help you. I not do anything, but I was telling him, well, I can't do Saturday because Fabian's session. And he's like, oh, how's he doing? It's like, that's awesome. Let me know when you post it because I want to watch it and stuff. So you've had quite an effect on him. And, thank you for accepting him and being his friend.
Oh, of course.
Very important to me.
He is the most lovable guy.
He is. Like I said, he's the exact opposite of
your
me.
brother and your wife. Like I love hanging out with you guys. I doing that music video with you so long ago was such a wonderful bonding experience. We just had a blast.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to try to relive that too. I really hope in the future there's some things that we can work on that it won't surpass that. I'm not expecting it to, but just to kind of relive that experience. We did
what? I'm going to
music
challenge
videos.
you. We can surpass that.
We can surpass it. All right.
We can have some fun. We need to get together and make something happen.
Make our final thing happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Not
man.
over until you say it's over.
That's right. Until the director says cut.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Comedy Central because I do, of course, have thoughts on things, but I think the comedian that said it best, that really locked something in, I think is Jim Jeffries. He's an Australian comedian. I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says. How can you? You don't. But it's kind of like comedians to me, and my take on his bit. They are the pressure valve for society because they aren't given a pass, but they can, as you said, make a joke, a commentary about a behavior or something in society and say, I don't believe this. I am commenting on the insanity of this thought process or the craziness of this action or how this thing that happens in the world, I'm shining a light on it.
Yes.
And if you can't sort of see something humorous about it to learn from it, then the comedian's not doing their job.
Yes.
But with the genre and the age that we all live in, it seems like now every year things are changing, but it used to be based on a century, 1800s, 1900s, so on. Now, with comedians, it's a decade based. So things 10 years ago, 20, 30, the line for what was accepted was here. And comedians are always on both sides. They have a foot on one side, like this is accepted now. This is not accepted. Well, let's put the toe in and kind of, they hover over that line. And every 10 years up until maybe 2010, that line kept going back as people became more in tune with each other, more communicative. Like, you saying this isn't the best thing to do. Like, this is offensive, and here's why. Because the majority of people don't accept this thought behavior or this pattern, or this attitude or, observation, and saying, well, I agree or disagree with that.
Yes. I'm going to tell you, Blazing Saddles is a movie that would not be made today.
I was going to ask you, Fabian, about that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
About movies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
everything, movies, some music, comedians, but yeah, movies. You can certainly comment on this. But what I think society needs to stop doing is looking at today's line, say we're here, and moving it back to things that happened before we as society agreed, say this is what you say, this is what you don't say.
Yes.
This is accepted, this isn't. And
I
so
think social education and social growth has happened. So kind of related to what you were just saying regarding something like Blazing Saddles or older movies that have not aged well, judging those movies based on our current level of education and social growth is, they don't really all get a pass, but know that you were judging something that was written at a time when we were still growing. And sometimes that there needs to be an allowance made for ignorance. In the future, we will all, as humans, look back on this time right now when many people eat meat and say, what? People used to eat like dead animals? Like you mean like in the caveman days, right? No, we're talking about like, you know,
in the iPhone
a couple
days.
decades ago. Yes.
I wasn't going to bring any of this up. So
no,
thank you for hitting the nail on the head.
We will always look back decades to centuries and be appalled at what people said and did. And I find I personally choose to forgive many of those older things. I'm still pissed off that the Library of Alexandria was burned down. That's not okay.
Right.
You have to choose. You have to choose how much stuff you will be appalled by and how you will respond to it. People, I think there are things that we will look back on today and be absolutely appalled. And the same way we look back on things from the 1980s, from the 1930s, the 1930s, oh my God. We will look back on things and we'll always be appalled at something. What matters is that we are growing and learning, and we are evolving socially.
Sure, it's learning from things like this used to be the norm. I mean, a prime example is my wife is a huge Burt Reynolds fan. Every Burt Reynolds movie, I am as well. But, extremely sexist. He was just a bigot. Like, it's all terrible stuff. But do you say, well, I'm just not going to support this person's art. I'm not going to watch their movies. I'm not going to appreciate what they presented at the time as entertainment, judging it by today's standards. Or you're going to accept it for what it is and be like, well, this resonates with me. I think this is funny and it's entertaining. And did he grow old and still believe these things? Or was it entertainment? Was it a movie? Was it a social commentary? Like, was it all a joke? Just like a comedian, like, I'm presenting a character in a film to shine a light on a particular behavior. We've met him several times, and he was the nicest, most courteous, like Southern kind of gentleman. I know he was from Florida, grew up in Florida. He was really gruff with me, kind of didn't care too much. He's like, go the other way. But he was so nice and talking to my wife and like, appreciate you coming out and just like, wow, that's how people used to act back in the day, and I didn't get a vibe at all like he was one of the characters in his soul of movies that he did. It's entertaining.
Now you're going back to my relationship with your brother a little bit too, how I have my demonic persona with my band. The thing is, when I've met a lot of people from metal bands, my band has opened for a lot of them. We've done a lot of shows together. All these people who are way Sataned out, and you see them on stage, they're rocking out. And these look like the most dangerous people on the planet. And then you talk to them backstage and like, hey, buddy, how are you? Like, I have hugged so many metal musicians. Like people in metal bands are the happiest, most stress-free, chill people, because when you go out on stage and you're like, oh, the whole time, and like you get all that aggression out backstage, you are just handing out roses to people because like you've exercised all the demons.
Right.
So that's been my experience. I've not met many mean metal people.
Right. It's it's called the new wave of heavy metal buds is the terminology. One of Jack's friends from the band Lord of the Tridents, Ty Christensen, he sort of coined this term, and it's like NWONB, like instead of the new wave of British heavy metal, it's the new wave of nice metal buds. It's the camaraderie and the fellowship that metal bands in particular have.
Yes.
And the angry, like irritated, hateful, kind of evil guys in bands and or girls, they aren't there like people perceive nearly as much.
Yeah.
And it's getting that percentage of people in just bands in general. And Dianne, you can talk about this just with Jack's experience being in bands and the people you've met. Those people are the ones that are like ostracized from the group. Like, we're nice and we're not going to treat you the way you treat people, but if you don't accept this brotherhood, this camaraderie of the community, then we don't say anything about you, but we just kind of separate ourselves from it. So it's a community within itself that's brought more people to accepting you don't have to be this character personality to be in a metal band.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. And it goes like it's brotherhood, it's sisterhood, it's everything, because the women in metal bands are neck and neck. It's the same. There's
right.
no difference. I've been the first time I heard Arch Enemy, for example, female fronted metal band, and I heard her scream, and I was like, well, first of all, I heard the music before I saw them. So one of my friends was introducing me to metal bands, and he goes, all right, Fabian, you got to hear this one. He put on Arch Enemy, and I hear this screaming, this great guttural wailing and all this perfect stuff. I'm like, he's awesome. And he goes, that's not a woman. That's not a guy. I'm like,
right.
I'm even more impressed now. And so because there's like metal knows no race, ethnicity,
gender, none of it. Whatever.
None of it. It's metal is for everyone. Yeah.
The community is sort of, I don't want to say policing, but everyone is sort of gravitating towards, it's not female fronted metal. It's not the best female fill in the blank. And we talk about this a lot because most of the partners we have in the guitar business and the coffee business, the bands, they're female musicians. One, I'm biased because, Simon, my wife, plays guitar and is a big influence on 99% of what I decide to do and be connected with. But from day one, playing in bands, talking with her about it, and we played in bands since early 90s, mid 90s we played together. Her perspective was she never wanted to be in like an all-female band. She had many offers. We want a guitar player to play in this a all-female band. At the time, it was kind of a big thing down here in this part of Virginia. There were a lot of cover bands and female bands. This is around you had like the L7 bands and Kitty, things like that. Yeah. But my wife was like, I don't want to be in a novelty act. I want to play my instrument, my guitar, and she always played a 7-string. From day one, we started our band, she played 7-string, and there were no female 7-string guitars. Every single person, guy or girl, thought she was a bass player, and she would get so mad still to this day. It's like she created a stage persona that was like we never had another guitar player. I'm a guitar player by, training and almost by birth. I started out playing guitar really young. But I was like, I never want to play guitar if she's playing guitar too. I'm like, I don't need to be here. The rest of the band pretty much doesn't need to be here. She's out front playing, shredding, just so creating this character in the band that after that first song, nobody was like, that's the bass player anymore. And the best we ever did playing was my brother plays bass. He would play bass and he loved to play bass, and I would play drums. And we just we were a band, but it was always like, I wanted her to have that platform of, I want to play in a band with a bunch of dudes. We're going to play shows with bands with her all dudes, and I'm on their level and higher, because she would have been in the field at the time of guitarists that were female. You had like Jennifer Batten was the main one to play with Michael Jackson, and not metal, but kind of a rock jazz vibe to her. There just weren't female shredder guitarists out there. And she was influenced by, dudes. Randy Rhoads, like a huge influence on her. Rocky George from like Suicidal Tendencies, like all these bands, her influences and what she listened to were all dudes. So when she played, she's like, this is what I'm influencing, and this is what I want to be compared to. I don't want to be the best female guitarist. I want to be the best guitarist.
Exactly. So, you've got to basically be so good that people do not even ask the question or notice gender. And like the question of that should just go away. It shouldn't even be a thing that is on people's minds. You look at that person, they say, that's an awesome guitarist. That's an awesome vocalist. And then the conversation ends there. And I think that's where we're getting. We're finally starting to get there. Sure. Where, in the 90s, you had L7. I loved L7. But
Drain STH. That's another one I just thought of.
Oh my God, I love Drain STH. But basically, when you don't
showing how old we are right now.
But you don't want to have a band that's known as a female band. How about just an awesome band?
Right, and they're just an awesome band. I like them.
And I love that there are female vocalists on primarily male bands, like Arch Enemy again, and gosh, I could list off a whole bunch, and rather than just do that, I'm just gonna
everybody knows. I mean, I'll say Spires. We got the little Seven Spires, one of my favorite vocalists, because when I hear a vocalist that can sing operatic, notes and melodies and harmony, and then all of a sudden there's this guttural demonic scream, and then there's a screechy black metal creepy Celtic voice, and I like listen to an album or song, I'm like, this band has 3 singers, got to be 3 people. And you look at it and it's this like 4'10", Filipino American girl that's like, just kind of hanging out. Hey, it's like, I can't believe that. Like, I've never heard a male singer with that range, and to realize it's just one person, regardless of it being female. It's just like, wow, I love that band. And Arch Enemy like struck gold twice. The
range is what blows my mind every time. It doesn't matter if it's a male or female vocalist. I do love the Arch Enemy vocalists. I know you recently interviewed Kim Dilla. She kicks ass. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And in terms of and what's funny, like my personal favorite metal vocalist, if I had to break it up into gender, I think Arch Enemy might be my personal favorite female metal vocalist.
Now we need to specify.
Now I've got to throw my male in though.
Right.
I think
it's probably Till. It's got to be Till.
You would think so. He's my personal inspiration in terms of how I sing in Synthetic Nightmare. I love Till. Rammstein is my number 1. But in terms of metal band vocalists, it might actually be the singer off Dimmu Borgir.
Oh, yeah.
His range has always, like, I listen to him and I always know it's him. Ever since Covenant, with a K. Like, I went to see Covenant back decades ago. Wow. It's funny when you start looking at your life in terms of decades, but
Like,
yeah,
oh,
just there are a few
how
vocalists
old
that
are
have
we?
always jumped out at me. I'm like, wow, your range is all over the board, and I can't help but idolize that.
Yeah. Now, when you say arch enemy, do you like Angela Gossau, or are you talking Alyssa? Which, because they have two very distinct
Yes.
vocalists. Like,
I'm sorry.
two-
I'm having a brain issue. Our blonde was the
well,
was
Angela was there. So when they first
she was
started,
she was
she's
first.
German. She has blonde hair. Alyssa has blue hair. She's always
Angela.
had blue hair.
I came on during the Angela days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I first started, because
Yeah.
Michael came from Carcass, who is one of my favorite bands of all time. And
Carcass was good. That
so
was my first metal bands.
when he left Carcass and started, I mean, he had another band, Spiritual Beggars, some other stuff in between, but Arch Enemy is really his, I hate to say swan song, because that was the Carcass album he didn't play on, but you know, Arch Enemy was like all of the grind elements of Carcass, but with the melodic death metal influence. It basically made Carcass's music more listenable. But he had a dude singer for at least the first one or two albums. And it's like nobody remembers him.
I was not, I heard of them back
Yeah.
with the dude singer, and I didn't care. I moved on.
Yeah.
I moved on. And then when I heard them again years later, when Angela was on, is when they became one of my top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody that, like, when you hear their stuff, there's like Rammstein. You know it's Arch Enemy when you hear the singer. And again, they've done it twice now with two singers that are like, they're setting the bar so high, like nobody's gonna cross it. It's like, oh, just do other bars that are equal to this bar.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, hearing that, and I think they opened so many doors for that gender classification to drop. Because you hear a voice and it sounds so massive and aggressive, in this thing that traditionally was associated like with men, like, oh, men's are like the barbarians, you know. And there's tons of music that's that, and it's cool too. Like I love all the Amon Amarth and the Gothic and the Nordic and the Viking stuff. I'm still waiting to hear like a female like Viking band. Like, where's that at? There's a new genre that needs to exist. Like all the shield maidens, like seeing like Lagertha and that character in the Vikings and being like, she's just a badass warrior. She's not male, not female. Like that is irrelevant. She's like killing everybody on the battlefield.
I feel like we've got some of that.
Yeah.
What
do you think, Diane? We should probably
like my Norwegian
here.
brothers and sisters.
A bunch of dudes talking about female singers, and Diane's like, what are you guys, what? Hello? What?
I'm just listening.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. You guys are having fun.
It's my turn to listen. And go. Well, how do you do it? Because, okay, so people don't know Diane's son, Jack, from Seven Spires. Do you ever feel feedback from him, like, because they have Adrian, their singer? Does that ever play a role in your feedback from him with, you know, his band playing, or how they're accepted or not accepted? Like, do you see any of that firsthand from, you know, a signed touring international band? Like, do you have any yes or no?
Very little. I've had a few people just, they're into that right now. You know, they like seeing a female front in the metal bands.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing, but I'm not as engrossed in the whole
genre
society as you guys are, you know. I mean,
well, you're welcome, so come on over anytime.
Thank you. Like, I can't name all these names and all that. I hear the bands, and I've got, you know, certainly I've been exposed to a lot of it, and it was kind of what I was interested in, aside from Phil Collins was my absolute favorite in Genesis.
You know what?
This metal
That's
stuff.
rubbed off on Jack, because that's what he said in one of the sessions. We were talking about just stuff he was into, and he's like, I really love Phil Collins. So now we know why.
Funny, yeah. But like AC/DC and stuff, when he grew up, that's what I had to kind of get him to calm down with. I'd have to put on the Back in Black album, start dancing around a little bit with it.
Wow.
That was the only thing that would calm him down.
Mom award. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's I'm shocked. I thought you were gonna say the Phil Collins is what you would play to calm him down.
No,
So
he didn't
all right.
like to sleep. It had to be that AC/DC, that beat, you know, that
Yeah, just that one,
basic
2, 3,
thump,
4.
yeah.
All right. You know what? I'm gonna set him up next episode. I'm gonna have some AC/DC playing in the background. See how he
It's
reacts.
funny how many of these things are connected, because Phil Collins, that "This Is the World We Live In" song, that music video actually scared me as a kid.
Really?
That was a bit of a transition for me to liking scarier things.
I'm not familiar with that. Like, what's the nickel tour?
Yeah, I think they played it on this last one where he's in the wheelchair in the front, and they did the masks, you know, the COVID masks and all the stuff that we're dealing with now. They had a newer version of it. It was crazy.
Yeah. Phil Collins, you know, a lot of that early 80s stuff, there was some scary stuff in there. This is the world we live in. And there were all these little puppets.
Right.
And the video actually scared me quite a bit. So I
mean, puppets.
Yeah. That is one of my early horror transition inspirations. I think it's a very dark song.
Well, yeah, all of his, you know, to quote Eminem, I saw a guy drowned in, I didn't help him. I just watched it, and now I wrote a song about it. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I don't think he meant to be dark. He was just always in the midst of some divorce or another, you know?
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. So life trauma influencing his art, which circles back around. Like, well, that's why he's not a serial killer, because he was able to take his trauma and have an artistic release from it. We
need to vent stuff in healthy ways. There's always a healthier way of doing it. Yeah. And that can be through meditation. That can be through neurotherapy and neurofeedback and treatment. It can be through having a podcast. Exercise. My therapy. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, whatever does it for you. Yeah. And it's great to have all these different things that we can all relate to and communicate with. And that shows as society, we're growing and moving, I think, in the right direction. 3 random people that wouldn't know each other on the street, like our little conversation, having a good time and learning. I mean, that's one of the reasons I do these, is to learn as much as I can. And the free therapy also helps, you know. But it's so it gives me like hope for the future. Is like people can have all these different things that influence them. And again, it comes back to, Fabian, what you said, like everybody's one. I say that all the time. And you get into like quantum theory and quantum mechanics, where, okay, scientists now know everything is connected on this level. It's just, well, how do you tell the guy that's, you know, buying a 48-foot long case of PBR that he's connected to them that's on the street corner reading poetry? That's the key for us, I think. Evolutionary step is that guy and they understanding each other and coexisting. They don't have to be friends. They don't have to drink PBR together. They don't have to read poetry together. But not being enemies, you know, is the ultimate goal. And it's going to happen, just like you said, Fabian. In the future, people be like, do you know people used to hate each other because they talk differently? Well, how long ago was that? That was like back in biblical times. It's like, no, it wasn't. Yeah. It was last week. We have a lot of learning to do. Right. And a lot of growing to do. And acceptance of different people is important. The guy who bought the case of PBRs is connected. But you know what? He does have the right to exist as his PBR buying self.
Sure.
And I accept that he is going to buy his PBRs and that he will have possibly many things about him that make him different from me. There are people of such diverse political beliefs that they believe they could never be friends. On my Facebook, there are a ton of people that say, if you think like this, then you could just defriend me right now. Like, all right, well, I've never been that person. I'm like,
and
okay,
I
well,
will. Bye-bye.
yeah. I'm like, okay, well,
Oh,
I don't feel like taking the time to go through and filter out all my friends based on political
right.
beliefs and various things here and there, because we all exist for a reason, I think. And as dark as that could be, because there are so many people, like extreme example, like Hitler. Like there are some people that have done some crap on this planet. And what matters is that we really need to look at what they've done and learn from them and be like, wow, how do we keep that from happening again?
Right. You can't undo it.
Yeah. What part of human nature led to that? And the thousands of people that would follow a person like that. How do we acknowledge it? You can say, oh, that's evil and it shouldn't exist. You can say that, and saying that in and of itself, like, say it, and it's not going to fix the problem. It's not going to make it disappear. I like to seek to understand. If there's something I don't like about the world, I want to understand what makes people go into that direction. In the case of Germany, I'm not going to go on this for long, but like, what are
right. We
the
just
political
lost about
issues that were happening there?
percent of the people. As soon as you said Hitler, I was like,
yeah, I might have to edit this out later.
yeah.
But yeah,
Oh no, I'm gonna open with this. The Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
Here's my
open.
friend. Let's
Yeah.
see what he has to say. Hitler.
Yeah. Like, let's talk about Hitler.
Well, Hitler, you can follow what happened. Basically,
Yeah.
World War I and the treatment of Germany resulted in a whole country being coagulated and behind somebody who's like, we're better than everybody.
Well,
we're not this thing.
It also was definitely not the whole country. There were so many Germans
Okay,
that were
sorry, you're right.
about what was happening.
I misspoke.
So there's a whole world of things and pressures that will force people into situations that you would not even imagine possible.
Right.
How do we mitigate and predict when those situations could arise? When a person is pushed down so hard that their only way of surviving and taking back any control in the world is to resort to terrorism. There are such difficult things to talk about that if they're not talked about, if they're just kind of swept under the rug, then there's a danger, I think. So people need to be able to communicate so openly. There are conversations that need to be had. So I think there's a power in when you write a book about trauma, or you make when you have a comedian that is going out and talking about edgy things, you're putting things into the greater human mass consciousness that need to be talked about, and saying, all right, there's an ugly thing in humanity right now. Rather than turn away from it, let's acknowledge it and talk about what this problem is. How do we fix this together? Because obviously, if half of a human okay, it's never really half the human population. If a massive portion of the human population thinks this way, and they are seen as incompatible with the other half, first of all, incompatibility is a bit of an illusion. If we are all one being, if we are all one, then there is compatibility. It's a matter of figuring out where common ground is and making common ground bigger than our little illusory differences. Right. Race can be an illusory difference. If you want to speak scientifically, the difference between a black person and a white person, to keep it real simple and to keep it black and white. Genetically, the difference there
It's like one little tiny
so
piece of
minute, it's
DNA.
not even measurable.
Right.
So it's not even worth mentioning. The differences between so many different little groups, it's they can be diminished, and common ground can be grown and given more power. Right. I think that's getting into my personal opinion. There are some people who will never be able. There are plenty of Democrats out there, for example, that will go, "Oh no, I got nothing in common with them." Don't even say that to me.
Right.
You know what? Defriend me right now.
Right. Yeah. So when we post this, you're gonna lose all your like extreme like left wing friends that you have. But
and guess how upset I am about that.
zero upsets given. I mean, it's all interrelatedness. So like Bill Hicks, this is like the one thing I was like, I want Bill Hicks in my podcast. He is a comedian. Yeah. So he's where my philosophy on life is part of one of his skits. His bits was like, we're all one, experiencing this ride of existence, separately. But he was one of those that he's had some really nasty sexist stuff that he said in his comedy. But do I discredit everything of value to me that I think is necessary to have because of this other stuff? Or do I allow people like, well, you said this because you thought it was funny? Or at the time, and this is, in the late 80s, 90s, when he was at his peak, it was more accepted to say some of these raunchy kind of things, because you also had like your George Carlin was big at the time. Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, all these guys said stuff you probably can't
say any of these things anymore.
I mean, just look at what happens to Dave Chappelle for saying stuff that's nowhere near the intense emotional perspective and like I feel this way kind of thing that back then were happening and they were commentating on. Chappelle's one of those guys that is just he's walked that border, and he's like one of the few guys that survived the attacks of everything coming at him. One, his integrity speaks for itself, but two, he's so wealthy, he doesn't have to do these things if he doesn't want to. Exactly. So I think he almost, it's more of a thrill for him to have that line and stand on both sides of the line and nothing kind of touches him. I mean, they attack, poor Kevin Hart got canceled for something he said so long ago that was obviously a joke about his son. I don't know. It's like, stop taking things out of context. Look at where it comes from. Look at the time period of its existence, and then look at future behavior. Was it this one thing, or was it consistent? Yes. The last thing I'll say on that is you get someone like Joe Rogan who constantly has said racist things, and it's like, I'm not racist. I have a black friend. How can I be racist? Like, the fact that you think that makes you not racist means that you're probably racist on top of the 20 things you said that were racist. Yeah. But like, he doesn't think he said anything wrong. And that's the biggest problem, is people standing by what they said in the past today and saying it's still okay for me to think and say this, but they're like, I'm not going to apologize for that. It's nothing wrong. That's not wrong with what I said. It's like, you're not growing, dude. You're not realizing that the line is moved now. So maybe in the past that was more acceptable to say, but as a white dude commentating on African Americans, no, that's never been all right to say. Not even lightly in a joke. I don't care if you were with all your African American friends and made a black joke. You didn't. You made this joke around all your white friends. So it's like, look at the evidence, buddy. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast of me ranting about
forever talk. But going back to that discussion of oneness, that's something that I'm actually kind of interested on the thoughts of your co-host here, where in your studies in neuroscience and such, what philosophies have kind of driven some of your research?
Yeah, so definitely the fact that energy is all connected and we're made of energy. I didn't understand that decades ago.
Mhm.
But at measuring brainwave activity, measuring our heart rate variability, and knowing that we affect people within this certain radius of us, I think it's 12 feet or 12-foot diameter, something like that, we will actually affect the person's heart rate beside us. Like how much, I mean, more connected it's kind of blown my mind.
Yeah.
Starting to see things like that and understand the whole energy aspect of it, which I wasn't really exposed to until the last decade.
Yeah, and the fact that you can map it, like you can see, like here's a proof of something happening, and here's the result.
Yes, and we've seen it. Like we'll be doing a brain map with a kid, and trying to get them to sit still or something like that. And if my technicians are getting more nervous, we'll never get a good signal from that kid.
Right.
Like, so you have to regulate yourself in a way to get, to stop that interference. So absolutely. There's way more connection than I ever comprehended before. Now I can see it in slight scientific ways that I use it.
Yeah, it's an incredible field. I think I learned about interconnectedness and so on between meditation, but also the remote viewing stuff I've researched, but just a fascination with consciousness is kind of what brought me into it. Like, how does this consciousness thing work that a lot of scientists are afraid to touch this question? They will not answer, they will not even ask the question. I'm fascinated by the nature of consciousness itself. And is consciousness something that is 100% produced within our brain, or does it have an aspect that is beyond our body? And so that's kind of what brought me into it. So right there with the same stuff that you were just talking about, how if you're in the same room as somebody and you start having an impact with them, even if you're not talking with them directly, these things are measurable. And so the question also becomes, how much bleed over are our mental borders? And so that's what I've studied some more. How far can consciousness reach? And remote viewing is basically, can you perceive something that is on the other side of the planet that you are completely disconnected from? Can you perceive something that is hidden several buildings down, hidden from you in a box that is specifically set up to be your target? And so consciousness has this very strange, we don't understand what it is, but it might not be limited to just our bodies. And is it possible that we are part of a mass consciousness and then just kind of cram down into our own little ego?
Yes, we are.
That's where I am right now. That's what I thought on this
oh
theory.
Man, there's so many things we could go on there, but quantum theory dictates that yes, all of our DNA, all of the quirks and spins and ups and downs, it's all connected to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
There, like you said, it's like, well, how do you make that like for everyone to understand? The best analogy is some of the heavier meditation I'm getting into, and focusing your relaxation and trying to control the brain waves. So like the neuro meditation, Dianne, I'm going to blow up your email about that concept that I think you may have just invented in our session here. We already have technology that lets us see across the world, the other side of the world. I can already talk to someone. I got to pick up a plastic cell phone and call someone that's in Australia. So our tools are available to let us communicate already a certain way. Getting into like the psychic and the subconscious realm that we pretty much, I think, from young childhood is sort of stripped out of us. We're taught more of like the real world, you know, dreams and all this thing and daydreaming and being creative. For me, especially experiencing as a kid, it wasn't really catered to. It's sort of, like I said, it's like stripped away from you, from being more introverted and thought educated with things. But what I would say makes the most difference is knowing that the tools are just something we don't have access to in our consciousness, and meditation helps tap into these things where you have things like shaman, and you have Native American culture where they would have peyote and could meditate and talk to the spirit world. Like that was the norm back then. And I guarantee you, if you somehow time travel, which I don't think is possible, but if you went back there with 2 cell phones and showed them this, they would be like, what is that? That's crazy. Like that, they wouldn't be able to comprehend that the same way that the standard for our societal thinking is ESP is this thing that's like movie stuff. Psychic abilities is movie stuff. But tying this into what we just talked about, let's say World War II era Germany, you had a maniacal leader investing resources in people to increase their psychic ability. We have the whole Project Blue Book that the US government brought these individuals and scientists and programmers over and spent, you know, huge sums of money and time on research to investigate these things. It leads more credit to, well, maybe this is something that's legitimate and has just a wide spectrum of possibilities. But ultimately, it's, you know, people have to have access to these tools to utilize some of these things. For people that don't know about remote viewing and some, I know we're kind of getting up to 2 hours. We could close out with some of what remote viewing is. I certainly want more people, Fabian, to know about it and kind of what you do. You have a whole group on Facebook that's interacts with individuals all over the world. I know you had a huge conference here in Virginia where people that practice these particular arts, I would say, all met in person and help legitimize that this is a real science and things are possible with the correct tools that you've learned how to use.
Yes.
So anything you want to say on that aspect?
Well, there were a few things you said in there that sparked me, but as far as that conference goes, what's great is that the people that attended that conference, the Psy conference, PSYFEST 2023, I still got my folder over here, which was a joint conference between the Monroe Institute in Charlottesville, as well as the International Remote Viewing Association, where the great thing about that conference is that it was not about remote viewers coming together to legitimize remote viewing. I think the people who have experience with this field of study are done trying to prove that it works. We all have the proof already. We've done enough, thousands of experiments, mathematically proving, statistically, beyond a doubt, that remote viewing is working. We've all done the experiments. We know it works. So when we get together in these conferences, it's just to compare notes, say, oh, we did this experiment and we did that experiment. So that's been a lovely thing. The world has not accepted it as a big thing yet. But when we get together, we're like, oh, wow. Well, I was doing missing persons cases. Like, I know people who do missing person cases for the FBI.
Right. Right.
And at that point, we're not really trying to legitimize. We're just trying to find people. So I've gotten to learn about people who were rescued in situations, many people who have been found, but it was expected and then later proven that they had passed away,
right,
or been murdered. So a lot of murder cases tied to various things here and there that remote viewers were brought in to find a body, find a missing person, things like that. So that's more the stage as to where it is now. The legitimacy of it will perhaps come at some point in the future when more people learn about it. But right now, essentially, there are many fields within remote viewing, missing persons cases being just one. You can, business people, anybody setting up a new company and wanting to figure out, should I expand my business into this new area? A lot of people will hire remote viewers just to collect data and see what information a psychic will have for them about what the future may hold. So I do this because
right,
it sounds like a pseudoscience and it sounds like this crazy weird stuff, but as far as legitimacy goes, this all did start. Okay, I'm going to skip past where it started, but say that in the 1970s, the US government poured millions of dollars into Stanford Research Institute and the military in training and experimenting with remote viewing, and they got the results they were looking for. And it's been declassified now, so anybody can learn how to do these techniques, but it's something out there. And we're trying to figure out why and how it works. Everybody has their own theories, but the theories that I personally like are that that there are latent psychic capabilities that are innate to all people. Some people more than others, some people that may be more in tune with themselves, but people are able to tap into an almost information field that is always out there. Same way in which we're all connected with each other. This bond that we all may share as humans, it might be an informational, measurable, perhaps electric energy field, some kind of an energy field that is everywhere, and we are mentally able to tap into it and draw information from it. That sounds really woo-woo, but at the same time, we have measured the ability of remote viewers to accurately see things at a distance that they have no physical way of perceiving. And it's been done in case after case to the point where we say, all right, it works. Right. We don't know exactly how it works, but a lot of money sure is changing hands. When I first got into remote viewing, I did not believe it would work. So I said, okay, I will pay people to remote view a target that I set for them and prove it to me. So I said, okay, if you correctly remote view this target, which I'm not going to tell you what it is, right? You tell me what this target is, and I'll give you $50. $700 later, I decided I'm going to stop paying people to do this, and I'm going to just I've been won over. I'm now going to participate in more of these experiments because I want to learn more of what you guys are doing. Like if I create a target right now, if you guys were remote viewers and I had something in my mind and or a little sheet of paper with a target written out on it, or a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge or Statue of Liberty or something like that, and I'm like, okay, remote viewers, go. Then you go through your little remote viewing techniques, and then you come back to me and correctly describe one of these targets, and then I have to pay you for it. I mean, this is in my experience.
Right. And it wasn't like 10,000 people and only 14 got it. Wasn't it like the first 14 people got it? Like you had to pay it pretty quick.
Like if 10 people participated, 8 out of those 10 would be on target. and
Yeah.
it's expensive if you offer to pay. So I stopped paying people because
Proof.
it
It's
has
been
now
proven. Let's move on.
found out for me. I have to move on, and now I have to think, okay, what else is at play here? Why is anybody able to do this? Obviously,
Right.
there's something in our modern way of thinking that does not allow for um, a justification for psychic abilities. I hate saying that even. I don't like saying psychic abilities because
Right,
it sounds like
right.
something that isn't real. So we have been stripped of tools that apparently even children have them until we strip them of these
Right,
tools.
right.
So to so it's a weird thing to talk about psychic ability in any legitimate way to somebody who does not believe or have experience with it, because suddenly you feel like you have to justify it.
Right,
And
sure.
for me, like going to these conferences where I don't have to prove anything to anybody, they've all got their years of background experience with this. So we come together and we have these conferences about, okay, I found this many missing persons. I found a new thing that I want to devote my remote viewing skills toward. A lot of people are now starting to develop financial markets. I am big on investing. I'm a big investor myself. I love the stock market. And I know a lot of remote viewers who are the same way, because you can use these abilities to perceive what may be happening in markets in the future. And there has been some limited accuracy. It's still new how people are experimenting with it, but I've been happy with results. So I'm not,
Right.
maybe I'll make
Yeah.
that $700 back.
Right. Well, if you haven't yet, I don't know, maybe you need to tune your abilities a little bit better. But you know, you're saying so many things. Obviously, you don't have to convince me of anything, but I like seeing your perspective, and it also gives me ideas. Like, for example, of what Dianne does. People, if you tell them that you could take readings of their brain waves and affect them for change in a positive way, they would look at you like you're crazy. Some people would. Just like if you say, we have a set of tools that we just don't have access to. They're not psychic abilities. They're just abilities that we haven't honed those skills yet. But there's no barriers to space, to time, to locate. Like it's that flowing consciousness that we exist in that you have to be able to conceptualize and form an opinion about that and believe that this is real. But then, you know, I see things like quantum computing is out there, and anything where they can affect one thing and something not connected shows the same result. I'm going to paraphrase what I read about. I can't remember it specifically, but there was like an experiment done, and I'm not for any animal experimentation. That's a big no-no for my ethical beliefs. But it was an experiment where they had, I want to say they were monkeys or gorillas, and they taught one group of monkeys a specific skill. Let's say it was like opening something, maybe with a can opener. And I'm really butchering this, but I've read multiple reports of it.
By the way, what you're talking about right now is called the 100th monkey.
100th. Okay. Okay. So it is real. I didn't make it up. So basically, over time, other monkeys that weren't taught that skill suddenly figured it out. Like once the test group, the control group learned this skill, suddenly other monkeys knew how to do it right away.
Yes.
So there's all these things out there that are proving stuff. Like, how many more examples of this type of stuff being out there need to happen before it's accepted? And it's the term again is the giggle science, where it's funny to think of something as a psychic thing or ESP. But then, like, we're here in Virginia Beach, you have the Edgar Cayce Center. Like, anyone researches that and sees the results of what he did, and it's basically remote viewing. He could sit and meditate and tell someone that was across the country, you know, you've got a tumor, you've got an ulcer. It's documented. It's like, this is like, you know, 60 years ago or so, maybe more.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you know, the key thing is educating and people realizing it's like, you don't have to be special. This isn't special. It's like using your cell phone. Again, I hate to go back to that, but if you teach someone how to use a cell phone, they now know how to use a cell phone. They aren't special. They just learned that skill. And it's getting people to understand, it's like, you can learn the skill with the proper techniques and training. It's awesome. And I really want to connect that to like the neurofeedback and stuff to track, because I know the research is out there where they see someone, you know, remote viewing or remote healing, which is something that I'm really interested in getting into. And like you said, with applications, as long as you're benevolent with what you want to use your tools for, it doesn't matter that you want financial success from it. You know, if you want financial success so you can be the next dominant world leader that's going to enslave everybody, no, that's not what it's for. That's
that shouldn't be what it's for. However, there's nothing to stop you from having the dark side of the force and the good side. So
yeah. And one of the things I've researched and studied and learned is like, the more you use this, if it helps you your skill level increase, you know, use it to try to find your keys. Use it to really get, because everyone's done this. Everyone has what they call deja vu. Everyone has thought of, oh, I really wish Fabian would reach out to me. It would be cool to talk to him. And then I get an email or a text. You know, we all do these things, so it exists and it's not random. The numbers, if you look at statistics, the odds of this happening randomly is like winning the lottery. So it's accepting that, well, this is something we have the ability to do. We just have to educate and learn and practice the techniques to control it. Yes. And there's so many movies and books and songs, and like everything out there is like connected to this. Like Stranger Things is a big one. Like their remote viewing, that's what she's doing, you know. And people should understand that. It's like, well, this is something that could be done in the proper setting and training and context.
There are a lot of blocks up. There are a lot of blocks with the world we live in. This discussion is so difficult for people to hear. So what I will say, for anybody who's watching this podcast right now going, kind of tuning out, let's put it into the mathematical terms that are harder to tune out. Basically, what we're talking about here is when you're making an educated guess, to be skeptical. If you are remote viewing a target and you're highly accurate, and people say, oh, well, you know, 50-50, you're 50-50 chance of getting something right in this situation. well, we're not talking about 50-50 odds when we're talking about like worldwide targets. It could be absolutely
anything.
So the likelihood of being on target is pretty off. But say we still want to say 50-50 for everything. We're not talking, the results are not numerically like 50-50 results that you would expect to come in. If you were looking at a deck of cards and telling somebody, all right, what is this card? And then I'll turn it around and show you, see if you're right. It's not quite the same thing. In that situation, you should be roughly right 50% of the time, regardless of any kind of a psychic ability kind of thing. Sometimes that can go up or down. That's the whole law of averages. Everything should come out to about C plus average, C average, 50-50, which I guess 50 would actually be an F. But
well, there's a curve. They have a grading curve now, so 50 is a C. But because it was the highest grade.
Exactly. But in the case of remote viewing, we're not talking about a 50-50 likelihood of getting something right. what we're ending up with is more like an 80%. You should not have been able to consistently remote view hidden things this many times, this often. So it's about being accurate over and over again in a measurable way. That makes remote viewing such an interesting thing. So it makes you think, okay, well, how can a person learn how to accurately describe something this many times unless there's some kind of a woo-woo psychic thing involved? It becomes an issue of, okay, well, you can't just guess at this and be right this often.
Right,
so there's
right.
something else at play, and that's where the psychic stuff starts to, you have to start looking at it and asking the questions. So what is this person doing? If the answers are always hidden from them, and rather than get the answers right less than or up to 50% of the time, for it to be this often, statistically that shouldn't be possible. So we have to ask the scientific psychic question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 50-50 to me is like flipping a coin.
Yes.
You have two options.
Mhm.
It's either A or B.
Yeah.
50% of the time, law of averages, it should be one or the other.
Yes.
But when you're remote viewing, how many items are in existence? Billions and billions of items. You
Infinitely.
can't even measure. You can't even measure how many items exist, because you could be pinpointing a star out in the middle of the Orion galaxy, you know?
Or you could be remote viewing someone's thought.
Right.
If you
right.
want to steal an idea and you want to remote view what somebody's thinking, you can do that too.
Yeah. So anything that exists ever, you could be picking.
Mhm.
To say 50-50 on everything that has ever existed or will exist. It could be something that isn't in existence yet. It's a medicine to cure I don't know, narcissism. Let's say that's something that's in the future. You could write that down.
Medicine to
There's the
cure
idea.
narcissism.
It's going to the labs.
Yeah.
Nice.
To be right, you know, 80%
wow.
of the time on everything that exists. I mean, come on.
I
How do you
love
say
that's where your mind went though. A medicine, that's like a medicine to cure assholes.
right? Not physical ones on your body, but physical
Not
ones
physical
that
ones, but-
exist in a creature.
You know, a complete jerk. Here's a medicine for that. That's
Right. And you inject it in them in childhood. Imagine that.
Wow.
It's a vaccine against assholism.
Well, then I got to tell you that's where you might have an ethical issue, because people have the right to be assholes. Unfortunately.
I don't know. That's like saying Hitler had a right to be Hitler. Did he have a right?
Well,
to be
he was more than an asshole though.
Well, no, I mean, I'm not saying, well, yeah, he was more than that, but equal playing field. Does everybody have the right to be whatever they are, no matter how we as society judges it? Well, you should do this, shouldn't do this.
That is an ethical issue, because oh boy, now we're getting into free will.
That's a whole nother
Oh, my
podcast,
friend.
guys.
Uh-oh. Now we're going off
Right,
real
right.
far right now.
Yeah. So how do you measure brainwave frequency of choice, Dianne?
I don't know that answer.
Now
Fabian, review the answer to that, and we come back, circle back.
What we're doing is leaving science and entering into metaphysics, where we have to ask the question of free will. And free will, like, do you believe in free will? Do you believe in the ability to make choices? Because that's actually a legitimate, huge question that we do not have time for in this podcast.
Right.
Like,
and by choosing to believe in free will or not believe in it, is that free will? So you can pick up on it. Like, where does this end? It doesn't end. That's the thing.
Well, yeah, that's where at some point you have to start closing those doors and say, okay, if we want to get anything done here, we're gonna say we're gonna have to start narrowing the playing field.
Sure.
And that's how science is done. We have to agree that the table in front of us is a physical table. We have to agree that it's actually a thing there, and that we're not necessarily living in a illusion right now. which
Right,
more
it's
and
not
more
a
people are
computer
starting to say it
program.
is all an illusion.
Yeah,
We live
it's a
in an
simulation.
illusionary world.
Yeah, but the fact that our reality, every one of us, it's different for each of us, then it gets hard to really determine if that desk is real or not.
Sure. Well, the
Because
desk
if I
could be a
perceive it
chair.
differently than you do,
Mm.
it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So like every one of our thoughts and our memories they get changed, and they get changed every day of our life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
yeah, that's a whole nother, that's
And-
another
Oh, it's a whole
podcast.
And what we experience
have-
today affects what we think we remember as well.
Yes.
You know, you
And
have
who we are.
you think how
Your
great something
personality
was,
will give
you
you
know,
different perspectives.
back in the day, and you look back now, you're like, oh, no, that wasn't great.
Yeah, it's all different. I done things when I was a kid that I totally regret. I'm like, why was I so mean to my brother, my little brother? Like, I'm thinking back, I'm like, I was such a jerk. Like, I purposely did some stuff.
See, my
that was like,
vaccine would have totally eliminated that.
we needed your idea back then.
So I'm working on it.
Thank
Well,
you.
it'll
you.
be a parental choice to give this to your child or not.
More ethical, scary stuff. Because will it turn them into a mindless zone zombie?
No, maybe it'll give them, like in Diane's case in training, it maybe gives them a pause. It's like, well, if I say this thing that's narcissistic, how is it going to affect these other people? How am I going to be perceived for saying this or doing this action? So it maybe gives them more of a synthetic conscious than anything else. That's probably worse than the ethical question. But maybe lowers their impulses to something that's generally considered not beneficial to our consciousness as a whole.
But then somebody has to decide that.
Yes, somebody has to decide.
And everybody's
ethically.
perception is
Oh,
different.
yes.
So there's
Well, the corporation decides that.
Stop.
Wow. Okay. See, this is where the ethical. Yeah.
This is where Jack would be like, I can't tell if you're serious or not anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not, but I am.
What we're talking about is approaching mind control.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah. I know.
and
that's
we got the scaries.
That's the point when the bubble brain thoughts start saying, you've run the course of your podcast, sir. Time to step away from the desk. The desk is also a chair or a bed, depending on your
Yes. And on a quantum level, none of this stuff is solid. So
Right.
who's to say that
Sure.
the desk today will be a desk tomorrow?
It's
know.
just vibrating, atoms
It's all
and
frequencies.
molecules. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great stuff, man. Everything.
Yeah. It's your perception of the frequencies is really all it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We're going to start hurting people in this podcast here pretty soon. Minds are exploding everywhere.
The three people that have left have just, we're done with them.
Oh yeah.
And it was us. We're the three people. I was the PBR guy, by the way, in the earlier story.
Okay.
Fabian,
And I was the
so.
bum on the side of the street.
Reading poetry.
Reading poetry.
Yes.
It's your next book, the child's perception of physics, volume 1.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's awesome. That fits
know.
our Booktober guest theme quite nicely, which this is our 2 of 3 parts where we just have authors on that have some strange connection that can have an adult session podcast together.
Well, wonderful.
Nice.
So-
Thank you. It's been fun. I am
Yeah.
gonna have to sign off here.
Absolutely. Yeah,
It's been
Diane,
so
thank you
good
so
meeting
much.
you, Diane.
Nice meeting you as well. I look forward to maybe working with you in the future.
Absolutely. And I think we would have some wonderful conversations.
Very cool. Well, everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us and experiencing this separately, but all together on our Sounds and Grounds podcast. I want to thank Dianne Kosto, my awesome co-host, and our super cool guest, Fabian Rush. We'll put all the links down there in the bottom. Please follow, check out everything they're into. It's super cool. I've been Zeus. You've been cool for watching. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Stay metal.